Guess who got a new microphone? Hello friends, and welcome to a brand new video and a brand new year. Happy New Year. I hope that you are doing well and that you are in good health. I have had the wonderful pleasure of having a lot of new people find my cozy corner of the internet. So I thought to ease into the new year, it would be really fun to just kind of look back on my photography from the past few years. It's the time of year to reflect and set goals for yourself. So what better way than to reflect on past work and kind of talk about where I'm hoping to take my photography and other work under that umbrella. For a little background about my history as a photographer, I was very fortunate enough in my school system to have classes like multimedia and video production, but for the past 5-ish or so years, I've really been taking it seriously as an art form and running my business and really delving into what my voice as a photographer is. A lot of the photos I will be referencing are found on my Instagram, which you can follow me here. The very first photo that I have on my photography Instagram is from 2018. During this time, I was primarily photographing cosplayers, mostly who were my friends, and occasionally I would do photo session slots at conventions to make a little side money. During this time, a lot of the locations I was utilizing at the time were at convention centers or hotels, so they weren't always the most ideal in terms of the aesthetics and lighting. Hotel lighting is notorious for just being terrible when you don't have any extra light sources. And when I first started, I was shooting only with natural light. I had no speed lights and had no knowledge on how to use those until a little later, and you'll get to see that progression. I did start to dabble in more portrait work during this time outside of cosplay. I was able to do some smaller gigs. I was not charging anything for these for the sake of getting experience, and it was a great learning opportunity. I learned a whole lot. I did a lot of experimentation. Again, a lot of this time was primarily natural light because I had no speed lights and I did not know how to use speed lights or continuous lights. I did not have any lighting equipment outside of a reflector, but I'm very proud of the photos I was able to achieve during this time. Some of them are very much of the time in terms of like the colors and editing style. I didn't have my own voice at this time, so I relied heavily on seeing what other people were doing and then twisting it in a way that I knew how to achieve a similar look. And through that, I was able to find what I did like out of a photo and what I didn't like. I'm not saying go rip off people's other work entirely, because that's just wrong, but take inspiration, especially when you're first starting out, and it's a really effective way of figuring out not only how to do certain techniques, especially in post, but what you like and what you don't like. During this time, lots of cosplay. I was really getting into portraiture. I'm not much of a landscape photographer or animals like that. I'm a portrait gal. 2019, I was doing it a lot more. Again, the cosplayers at convention centers and hotels, and I was picking up a few tricks along the way with my editing. It was very stylized and a little over-edited. This photo in particular is of Macross. I've never seen it, but this was one of the first years where I finally got a speed light, which my mentor passed down to me. And I love the shadows in this, and I just ruined it by putting so many overlays on top of it. Eventually, I learned to scale back on my editing and focus more on colors and composition, and less is more. And you can see that in some of these other photos during that same year. I did have, I think, one time before lockdown where I was able to have some of my friends in my old studio, and I put up a backdrop and we just spent a whole day photographing different costumes, and that was so much fun. I got to do a lot of experimentation and playing around with gels on my lights. I now had upgraded from one light to I have 4 at this time. Getting able to play with bouncing color on a white backdrop to change the color, having intense hyper color. You'll see during this time I was very much into the hyper color, hyper pop editing style. They are very, very cute and very fun. And then in lockdown, I did a lot of self-portraiture. This was honestly the best way I was able to do my experimentation because I was able to do it on my own time. I didn't have to work out any scheduling things with a model or a friend. So it was just me. It was on my own time. It was my own ideas, whatever I wanted to play with, I was able to do it. And if it turned out terribly, then I was the only person who had to see it. And through this, I was able to hone in on what I wanted out of my style. I did a lot of dissecting of other artists that I was drawn to because I was in my hyper pop era. I was very drawn to Jim Henson, and there's a particular series of photos I did with these googly eye flowers that I made. And that was very much the direction I thought my art was going to head in. So it's very interesting to see how that didn't happen. And I still adore Jim Henson and the Muppets and Dark Crystal and all the many facets that fall under the Henson Company. You'll see that the hyper pop didn't resonate with me anymore and didn't feel as authentic, and you'll see the shift from my hyper pop to my more, it's more subdued than hyper pop, but not as subdued as all neutrals. Lots of self-portraits during this time. I played a lot with post-editing and took a lot of inspiration from zines and other creative portrait photographers that I was following during this time. 2020, 2021, and parts of 2022 were a lot of self-portraits, composite work, and I was trying to incorporate still life photos. I, at the time, had opened an online print shop, and I was trying to make art for that, and I didn't think anyone would want my portrait because that's kind of random, but I wanted to create these hyper pop still lifes. I was following a lot of illustrators at the time who had their own print shops that they opened during the lockdown and thought, why not throw my hat into the ring? And it ended up not working out. And so I do have some of the prints from this time still and kind of stored away. And I used to be like super sad about it, and now I don't care. Yeah, a lot of my work during this time was an effort to try and make inventory for that because I couldn't really delve into taking clients at the time. And then I'm not sure what shift happened, but I really wanted to try my hand at these like fantasy painterly edit styles, all of that. So that's where my origin of fantasy photography starts. So I bought a oil painting fabric backdrop and took my own self-portraits because that was how I was experimenting. And I loved these photos. I adored them. I thought they were so beautiful, and the dramatic lighting was just so delicious to me. And so I played a lot with that. End of the year, middle to end of the year, it was safe to see friends again. So I planned my first fantasy photo shoot with my dear friend, and we created a whole bunch of beautiful kind of witchy photos. Got to play a lot with temperature lighting. I think I did it in post, but I'm very much someone who leans very warm in terms of the lighting. So it was really fun to play with something a bit cooler. Some of my favorite photos that I have in my portfolio came from this photo shoot. And that was what I was aiming to do. I really wanted to build my portfolio during this time because I spent a lot of time working on portraiture and I wanted to be able to offer my services, and I needed a portfolio to do that. And so thankfully I had so many wonderful friends who volunteered to be my models for that, and I'm so incredibly grateful for them. And again, I learned so much about my editing style and what I wanted out of photos. I've re-edited some of these photos about 2 or 3 times, messing with color palettes and just experimenting and just learning a lot about what I want out of my photos. So 2022 was the last year that I would do self-portraits for a while, and that was because I moved and I no longer had my sandbox to play in. I had to say goodbye to my studio. One of the last self-portraits I did was actually outside. I did these beautiful fairy-like photos of myself. I bought some fairy wings from Fancy Fairy Angela. The way I like distorted and manipulated them to fit the angle probably isn't perfect, but I love how these photos turned out. They're one of my favorite photos of myself, even if my style isn't really this, again, that hyper pop kind of wavy warp style that was kind of trendy. Maybe not in a grand scheme, but in my little bubble of the internet, it was a kind of trendy thing to do. I stopped doing self-portraits, but I took some beautiful portraits of my wonderful friend Sydney, who you've seen on the channel if you've been here before, and she has for many, many years helped me in being my model, and I'm very grateful to her for that. I hadn't done cosplay photography in a long time. At the end of 2022, cameraman for a cosplay music dance video that my friends did, and during that time I also took some photos. The last big cosplay thing I would do, I still do lots of cosplay stuff for my friends, Furly Carnival and Lunatic Cosplay, because I love them. But other than that, I don't really do cosplay photography. It's pretty much just exclusively them. This is also when I started to do a lot more going out and about and taking photos and making silly little YouTube videos for that. So I did my first roll of film, which was very nerve-wracking and exciting, and I love those photos. They're not perfect. They were done on just a small, simple Kodak point and shoot, which was the easiest thing I could have done for myself, with it being my first roll of film. And that was just kind of the gateway. And now I have so many film cameras, and I admittedly haven't gotten around to using them all. Film is very expensive right now for the roll itself, and also for me to get it developed and scanned. It's not outrageous. I want to, fair wage and all that good jazz, but it is more expensive than shooting on my DSLR. So I don't get to do it as often as I would like to. But the few times I was able to do it, I absolutely loved the photos. Not every photo turned out the way that I imagined it would because of the camera I was using and maybe being in a low lit area for the, Fuji 200 film, whatever the reason may be. But I think there's something authentic and charming about film photos that don't turn out the way that you intend them to. I'm still learning a lot about film and a lot about the process behind that and how to use different cameras. It's something that I really want to continue and do as often as I can afford to. I'm trying to be nice to myself that even if it's not as often as I would like, I'm still trying, and there's no time limit on learning film. You can really see the shift in my color palette from 2022 to 2023. I still love to play with color, but it's less magentas and bright yellows and more of rich reds and deep greens and blues. I like to play more with some harsh shadows. My photography at times used to be really flat. As I've gotten more used to lights and being able to play a lot with them, I love to play with shadows and doing night photography. I opt for a more contrasty look now. Every Halloween, I love to play with more fantastical themes, and during 2023, Sydney and I did a vampire photo shoot inspired by The Lost Boys. That's one of my favorite movies from the 80s, and I just love the styling done in that movie, and so we took a lot of inspiration from it, and I love how these photos turned out. We went to a beach at sunset, which also very inspired by the film, and we stayed until dark and took some night shots, and I just love how dramatic and intense they look. I haven't always been proud of my work, and I had a lot of, I've talked about it before, battling imposter syndrome and getting too much in my head and overthinking it. But during this time, this was when I really started to see like, oh, I do have some talent and I should be proud of my work, and this is actually really cool. It's been a nice shift in mindset. I've been able to do some really cool stuff because I haven't been so hard on myself. And we're finally in 2024. 2024, I started my creative year with assisting on a music video production for Galaxy Girl Paida, and I was also the photographer for that, so we took some promotional photos. That was a project full of so much love. It was really fun to get to kind of lean into that old hyper pop style that I used to do and kind of blend it with what I do now. And I love those photos. I think they're so fun and magical, and it was a really fun day. And you should stream Galaxy Girl Paida on Spotify. In March, Sydney and I went to a little harbor and took some photos on an old Polaroid, and I also took some on digital just because why not? And it was really fun to get to compare the two. They're different processes. I only had 6 or so Polaroids to use. Those are some of my favorite, and also some of my favorite digital photos that I've taken. I just love how the colors turned out and what I was able to do. And the Polaroids are just so fun and they look vintagey. It was a really fun day. It was super cold, but it was very rewarding. Summer 2024, I got a much needed haircut, and to celebrate that, I took my own self-portraits, which it had been 2 years at this point before I had taken self-portraits of myself. I want to say like 1.5 to 2 years. I can't really do the math right now, but it had been a while. I was a little rusty. It took a little bit to kind of like get into the groove of posing myself and finding myself in the viewfinder, but it was really fun. And I always tell myself I need to do self-portraits more, but it's a lot of work and it takes a lot longer to take photos of yourself than of other people, so I don't do them often. I did my first roll of expired film this past year, which was a trial and tribulation, I will tell you. I wanted to do a video comparing an expired roll to a roll that I would shoot now as a beginner to film, and I could not reload my camera. It would not grab the film. I tried everything, and I ended up rewinding the entire film to where there was no tail. It could not be done. It was not going to be done. I was not a happy camper on that beach. I learned a lot. I learned a tough lesson, and I at least was able to do the expired roll because it was already preloaded into the camera and halfway completed. And it was also really fun to see what was on the existing frames that were already used. But yeah, I did my first roll of expired film. Not a full roll, but I was able to get some cool stuff on there. Did another cosplay project for like Carnival. Those are super fun. It was really fun to have the arcade in the background. And then I did probably my favorite photo session of the year, and that was my Ophelia photo shoot. This struck so many chords for me as an artist. Not only was I able to make beautiful photos, and I will say they're beautiful. I am so proud of these. I will scream it from the rooftops. So it was not only rewarding from that aspect, but the creative process was so fulfilling. Being able to play with set design was something that I had been missing from my photography for a long time. It's not something that I've been able to do to this degree, aside from the backdrop setups in my old studio, but being able to have an inflatable pool full of water, a backdrop, and florals. A very simple set, but it was the most detailed that I have done for myself ever. And so that was kind of a milestone for me this past year. And again, I just love the photos. It was such a fun day. Missy and Sydney were such champs for sticking it out in that cold water. And there were some things that didn't go perfectly. Again, we were able to create such stunning images. And the little things that didn't go right, I can easily tweak for next time because I will be using that inflatable pole again. And then my last photo shoot of 2024 was the Halloween photo shoot that I did with Sydney, where our theme was pirates. We went as pirates to the Scarborough Renaissance Fair back in the spring, and it was something that was so much fun. We just kind of made the whole year kind of the year of the pirate. We listened to so many sea shanties this past year. It was just so fun that we wanted to kind of revisit it and take photos because we didn't get any photos from Scarborough, so it was nice to be able to do it again to some degree. And the location that we went for this was so beautiful. It's a location that had been on my list for many years because I could get really, really wide shots. And it was great to be able to use my telephoto lens because I never get to use that lens. And it was a great challenge, and I learned to love that lens. I learned that I love that lens a lot. And we were able to just create some really fun autumnal pirate photos, which I feel like you don't really think of pirates in the autumn time, but it ended up working really well for us. So that pretty much covers the past 5 or 6 years of my personal work for my photography. And I've learned a lot from those 5-6 years. And it's really helped me determine what I want my North Star to be, the direction that I want to head my photography in. And that's really leaning into the fantasy side of photography. I get so much joy out of building stories, creating sets, the costuming aspect, to create these just stunning visuals. And it's something that I just want to continue to build on for the foreseeable future until I get tired of it. But it really sparks so much joy in my heart. I'm someone who has always been a fan of Lord of the Rings and high fantasy, so being able to just kind of celebrate that through my artwork is very rewarding and inspiring. So I really want to continue to do that. I will of course continue to shoot my portraits for clients, but as far as, the fun stuff that I get to do on the side, I definitely want to do more fantasy work. I'll also continue to do cosplay projects from time to time, but I have so many ideas that I want to play with. I will of course continue to do film. I have film ideas. I have rolls of film sitting in my refrigerator that have been waiting for me to use them. So I will of course continue on my film journey, taking candids, doing portraits. I have a fun project planned that I need to work out the finer details to make happen. Again, I have a list of things I want to do, and I'm going to make them happen. Fantasy, continuing film, just having fun with photography and having fun with YouTube and videography and just taking you guys along the way more. Those are really the goals that I have for myself for the upcoming year. I have been yapping for so long. I cannot imagine what this video is going to end up being. So if you stuck around to the end, thank you so much. I've had the wonderful experience of having so many people find my little cozy corner of the internet. So if that is you, I'm so happy you're here. And if you're new here, if this is your first time seeing me, thank you so much for watching and sticking around to the end. If you would like to see more of my face, you can subscribe, leave a like, all that good YouTube jazz. And I'll see you next time. Bye.